With over 400 celebrity interviews and tons of pop culture nerdiness, Too Opinionated is a safe haven for your inner geek. Find us at meistercon.com or on YouTube under MeisterCon Pod. And please subscribe. It would really help us out. Thanks, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. I am so excited. Today, I've got filmmaker, director, writer, actor, composer, Emilio Palame. So welcome, Emilio.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Michael.
That's a lot of hats.
Yes, it is. That's why I don't have any hair left. I've worn so many hats that there's just no chance.
You know,
and I love them all too, by the way.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'd like to say that that's the reason I don't have any hair, but I know that because back in the 80s, I had like 80s hair. You know, I had a full head of hair and I hated it because it took so long to fix. And I think one day it just said, okay, I'm out. You're not appreciating me. I'm out of here.
Yeah, that's interesting when your hair speaks to you that way.
But I'll have to admit, it's so easy now. You know, you get out of the shower and you're ready.
Ready to go.
There's some advantages. You just got to wear a hat if you're in the sun.
Yeah, I don't really like hats. My dad was like a big hat wearer. He had the Stetsons and the real. He was a sharp guy. He was an electronics engineer and he wore a suit every day. Worked for Sylvania Electronics. Dapper guy.
Yeah,
I'm actually Emilio Jr. and I was born on his birthday.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, what was that like growing up? Did you celebrate on the same day or did they separate it out?
Oh, I loved it. Are you kidding me? I was so happy to be celebrating with my dad. I love my dad. You know, my dad was way cool.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I've spent my entire life looking for a hat that I think looks okay on my head, and I still haven't found one.
I'm the same way. I'm not a hat. The only thing I ever did, I for a while I rocked the newsboy kind of hat. You know, that New York style.
I've tried those.
Yeah, that one I liked. I had a period of time where I wore that for a while, but that's about it though.
Yeah, I'm same. Baseball cap once in a while, but that's it. Just haven't found. It's tough to find a hat that looks good on you. Some people look great in them. Most of us don't.
Well, I'm with you there.
So, Emilio, I like to start this way. You've had such I think, an interesting career. Talk a little bit about what got you into the entertainment business, you know, and when you started, did you start on the acting side or did you immediately go into the musical side? You know, talk about that.
Well, I was a musician from the time I was in a lead singer in a rock band when I was in 6th grade. We were called the Magical Staircase. And,
I like that.
Yeah, it was a good little group of guys. It was 2 brothers, a bass player, a guitar player, and then my cousin Mike Geraci played drums, and I just lead sang in front of the band. And then eventually, my Aunt Carol let me use her Baldwin acrosonic organ, and I started playing organ in the band. And that's when we started switching from playing stuff like by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and more guitar-oriented stuff, Cream, Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
And then we started getting into the Doors and Vanilla Fudge because the organ was really predominant in those genres. So I really got into that. And then I asked my parents if they would get me a piano because I wanted to study piano. And so I took lessons from a guy named Tony Mano, who, God rest his soul, was a great influence on me. He was one of those teachers. I was raised in Buffalo, New York. And so with the snow, I had a lot of time to practice. But Tony Mano came to the house and he taught me piano lessons. And one thing I learned from him that really inspired me to really want to be a musician was at the end of every lesson, he would sit down and he'd say, I got to play something. And he would go into this really sort of rhapsodic, almost concerto, nocturne, sort of sounded like a cross between Chopin and Debussy. And I'd say, well, what was that? Was that Chopin? He goes, no, that was all improvised. And so I said, I want to know how to do that. I want to know how to improvise like that. And that started me on my journey of writing material, and then eventually getting into jazz. And then I started playing in a couple of local bands to play weddings and parties. And then we started another band when I was in high school called Summer Voyage. And what it was all of us, when we got back from college during our summer months, we had met in high school, and then we continued it, and we played local nightclubs and dances and parties, and you know, that's where I cut my teeth learning all the Great American Songbook, and not to mention, like, because we at a wedding or a party, you have to play everything. You have to play everything from Sinatra to the Beatles. So it's really actually a great learning environment, because it forces you to learn all different styles of music, and it really expands your knowledge both harmonically, rhythmically. And I sang, I played, and then I wanted to really study music formally. And so, Michael, I auditioned for Fredonia State University, which was part of the great SUNY system, State University of New York. There's you know, Brockport, there's, you know, Ithaca College, you know, and Fredonia was one of the ones that Rockefeller at the time had put a great deal of money into the school. So that the school was had beautiful pianos, had a great orchestra room, had a 24-track recording studio when no one else did.
Yeah,
you know,
nice.
so it was a really great environment for me. And I auditioned for the school in my second semester of my senior year, and I had very little classical training. I'd always played by ear. I played jazz and that. So I took some formal lessons. I learned 3 pieces. I learned a Debussy prelude. I learned a Bach invention, and I learned this very sort of technically flashy piece by Khachaturian called the Khachaturian Toccata. So I brought those pieces to the audition, and then they put a piece of music up in front of me, and they said, "Now, can you sight read this?" And I went, "Oh, okay." And of course, I struggled because sight reading wasn't my thing. I always read chord charts and learned by ear. And they said, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's very, very good." You know, and now here this. I'm feeling like the possibility of my dream being crushed.
Right.
Of going, and now this, you got to remember, this is second semester senior year, and at my high school they had a chart in the main hall and showed where everybody was going to college, and mine was blank. So I didn't know what I was doing. You know, this is like, you know, March, I think, of second semester, so you kind of get the drift, right? So
yeah, no pressure.
No pressure. So at the end of the audition, I looked at the 2 adjudicators, and I said, you know, music, I know music is all I want to do for the rest of my life. And I got kind of choked up, and I said, if you let me in this school, I promise you, I will work harder than any music student you've ever seen. And they looked at me like, okay, I got put on the waiting list. So by May of my senior year in high school, you know, you didn't get an email in 1970, in the 70s, right? You didn't get a phone call, you got a letter. So of course I get the letter from State University of New York in Fredonia, and I got accepted. And I also, because of my grades, I had a Regent scholarship. So I was able to go to the school and have my tuition paid. And really, that was the beginning of me actualizing my dream of really studying music formally. And because the school had a fantastic jazz ensemble program, I was able to audition and get accepted into the first band when I was a freshman, I was one of only 2 freshmen that got into the band. Then I was voted to direct the second ensemble when I was a sophomore. And then my junior, senior, and my graduate year, where I had gotten a graduate assistantship to teach jazz arranging, improvisation, and theory for non-majors, I ran the entire program for all those times. And we went to the Notre Dame Jazz Festival in 1977. And I won Outstanding Composer, Arranger, and Keyboardist. And those accolades and that recognition from high-profile jazz musicians and being in that environment and being like dissecting Thad Jones and Count Basie's big band scores, and that really was the education that I longed for. So that's kind of was the basis of where I started. Excuse me 1 second, I want to get some water.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to guess that you were going through middle school and high school in the 70s, because both of those band names were very 70s type of names.
They were. Yes, they were. Yeah, those were, you know, the typical, like how adventurous and influenced by the Beatles and those sort of ethereal type of titles. Yeah, it was a lot of fun though.
Yeah, of course. When you learned to sight read, did that mess up you being able to play by ear, or can you now do both?
I do both, and I'm glad I actually, in all honesty, I'm glad I learned that way, because I'm viscerally connected to the tones of the piano and music, and not just being a typist, seeing notes and just repeating. Not that reading music and learning all of that is great, but it wasn't a hindrance to me. At that point it was a help rather than a hindrance.
Yeah, my stepson plays by ear, and he can play about any instrument, but he struggled a little bit when he was learning how to read music. So when he first got into band in middle school, he struggled with that, but eventually he was able to get the hang of it, and he still can play by ear. So that's why I was curious if.
That's a great question, Michael. Because I think some people get hung up on that.
Yeah. Do you play any other instrument besides piano?
Well, here's the thing. I do sing, and because I have a degree in music education and theory and composition, and the requirements to get a degree in education are you have to take a basic proficiency course on violin, viola, cello, clarinet, flute, trumpet, trombone, and percussion instruments. So you have to know them well enough so that if you become a band director at a school, that you can say, well, the fingering for that is you're playing it wrong in the upper octave. It's this, and so not that I could do that for you now, because that's I'm 40 years removed from that or so. But at the time, I could get a sound out of a trumpet, a clarinet, and play a violin. It's like somewhat god awful, but you understand the mechanics of the instrument, and that's something, Michael, that really helped me in my orchestration and arranging, because I had a sense of how these instruments work, what was hard to do, what was easier, and so forth.
Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. So how did you go from graduating from school into writing music for TV and movies?
Well, throughout my college years, I did a lot of arranging and composing, mostly for big band, because I was directing the jazz ensemble, and but I did write some sort of contemporary modern music type of more tonally free kind of stuff, experimental, because the composition teacher at school wanted us to experiment with the more modern aspects rather than trying to write something that sounded like Bach or Chopin or Beethoven or whatever, more of the modern composers, which a lot of it I didn't really particularly like, because I'm like a tonal guy. I don't like stuff that sounds like really off,
Right.
But it was an adventure that I learned a lot of different things in terms of how to pit sonorities against one another, and it was valuable for that. When I got out of school, I had asked a bunch of the gentlemen that were in the Fredonia Jazz Ensemble to play in a local band for me in Buffalo. And I at one point was playing with my 16-piece big band in Buffalo, New York, in 1976, 77, 5 nights a week with a 16-piece big band. And or at least 2 or 3 nights at several different clubs. My brother's Sam became my manager, and we had all the books and the sound system, and I used my Fender Rhodes, and we played at a place called Starvin' Marvin's, a place called Eduardo's. We played at the big Art Park Jazz Festival. We played a little bit in Southern Canada, in Ontario, and in Rochester and in the surrounding areas of upstate New York. And then the blizzard of '77 hit. And in all honesty,
I remember that blizzard.
Yeah, and it became debilitating. Not only did I wonder whether I was going to have people come hear the band, I wasn't even sure if the band was going to be able to show up. And so that got old. And I said, okay, I don't want to move to New York because I don't want more of that. I had enough. I was 25 and I've lived my whole life, because Fredonia State University was right off the Lake Erie. So it was really cold and snowy and or raining, which was a benefit to me, Michael, because I stayed in and practiced. It was kind of nothing else to do. I was never a partier. So I just played, wrote arrangements, practiced, and
not a bad way to spend your spare time.
Not at all. No, it was like I said at the beginning of this conversation, it was my dream to do this. And I was finally able to like not be around, you know, a whole bunch of my old buddies from that. I was in a whole immersed in this environment, and I made the most of it. I practiced, I wrote, and I arranged, studied, and it's really, that is where I really cut my teeth. And I think if I had been in like maybe a school that was a lot more frivolous or whatever, and it didn't have the weather it had, maybe I wouldn't have developed as well as I did. But it was a match that really worked for me with my personality and my goals. So so after that, after I went to, I was in Buffalo, the Blizzard 77 hit, and now I'm like, okay, I'm gonna move to the West Coast. And so my buddy Don, who I'm still friends with, Don Nowak, we've been friends, and we still are since freshman year in high school. Is my longest standing friend. He's actually in the Knights of Swing. He plays Mr. Conway at the board. We packed up together. He took his car, I took my car. We drove cross country. Took about 5 days. Stopped in New Mexico and visited some of his relatives that were there, and then just looked for an apartment. Of course, we went to Hollywood first. We got up an apartment right on off of Sunset Boulevard.
Nice.
And then the drummer who had been playing in the big band, my friend Bob Leatherborough, we had worked together, and he even played at Fredonia. We sort of imported him as a ringer into the big band at Fredonia, and he moved out also. So the three of us shared an apartment. And then my older brother, Sam, who's about 5 years older than me, who had been gotten out of the Marine Corps and had gotten married and gotten divorced. He said, well, I'm going to move out to California too. So he came out, and then he said, well, you guys can't live in Hollywood. This is ridiculous. You know, you're going to get robbed. You're going to get, you know, made all this. You got to do something. So somehow he convinced us. He drove all the way out to the San Fernando Valley, which is about a half hour or so from Hollywood. I said, well, I want to be in the thick of everything. He goes, no, you can go to that, live in a place where you can have some peace and quiet and some comfort.
That's right.
So he found this 3-bedroom house, and the 4 guys, my brother, Don Nowak, my cousin, and the trombone player in the band that was in the band, we each occupied a room. So now somehow he convinced the landlord that it was okay for 4 guys to move into this house and rent. So we rented it for quite a while, and then eventually guys moved on and went on their way. And it ended up being my brother and myself. And then I had met my wife Ellen at that time, and we decided she moved in with us, and we had our first child. The 3 of us lived together. It wasn't the greatest situation. My brother, and you know, it's brothers.
It can be rough, yeah.
I mean, God bless my brother, because he's a wonderful guy. But our personalities are very different, you know.
Yeah.
But although he's always been extremely supportive of me, which I love him for. But so what ended up happening is he moved out, and then my wife and I ended up. Well, first of all, we bought the house together, the 3 of us, and then my wife and I bought him out, and then we started our life together as a married couple. Had my son, who ended up writing music with me, and we can get into that a little bit later. And my daughter Emily, who's also a great musician. And then now I have 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah. I was going to ask you if any of the kids had inherited the musical ability.
Both of them, both my son and daughter are very, very musical. My son and I wrote 111 episodes of Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide on Nickelodeon together. We spent 5 18-hour days a week when he was only 18 years old. He's so talented. He played guitar, sang. We wrote hundreds.
I would love to do that with my kids. That's part of the reason my son and I started this podcast, was so we could spend some time together. So, I mean, what a great time to do that. You're spending all day creating with your son. Yeah. That's terrific.
And it was interesting because we got the show from a friend of mine, a composer who had been composing the music for several shows on Nickelodeon, and I was part of his arranging staff. And when he was offered the show of Ned's Declassified, he didn't have any time to write any more music. He said, "Do you and Emerson want to do this?" And of course, we said yes. And by almost the end of the first season of doing 20-some episodes of that, 21 episodes of that, the money was not good. the basic pay was not very good at all for both of us.
Yeah.
And we were thinking like, well, do we really want to do another season? Because they asked us to do season 2. We actually did 3 seasons. And I'll tell you, at the third quarter of the first season, we said, I don't think we want to do the second season. And then our first residual check came from ASCAP, and it was $45,000 for each of us.
Ooh,
from the first.
that might change your mind.
You think? We didn't care if it didn't pay enough to do it, and apparently Nickelodeon knew that, but we didn't understand that, right?
Yeah.
So now and that's actually the reason why I bring it up and to bring the monetary aspect of it, because I was still playing weddings, parties with like a very high profile R&B band. We played Paula Abdul's wedding. We played Larry King's wedding. We played at the Super Bowl. We opened for Earth, Wind and Fire. This band was really a hot band. It was like 3 female singers, a male singer, 4 horns, piano, bass, drums, guitar, percussion. And we played everything from Sinatra to Prince, and the band worked a lot. Like we would do sometimes 4 gigs a weekend, all at the Beverly Hills Hotel, the prime hotels, very, very high profile gigs. We played for Dick Clark, so it was, I was still doing that and writing the music for Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, and still doing orchestration and arranging for Guy Moon, who got us the job. And I was working probably 75, 80 hours a week at least.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot. But what it did was it allowed me, I had accrued so much debt by that point of working, just gigs and gigs and gigs. Now with the money from the television and all this stuff, I finally was able, when those residual checks started coming in, I was finally able to really pursue my dream, which was to be an actor. And I tried to do it, Michael, in my early 30s when my kids were young. And my agent would say, hey, I got an audition for you for a guest star on this show. And I'd say, well, I have a recording session, or I've got stuff that's due. I can't make it. I only needed to say that a few times. And they said, I'm sorry, you got to pick between one or the other. And of course, what am I going to take a chance and hope I get a TV gig as an actor, or am I going to take the stuff that's paying the bills and supporting my family? So I put that on hold. So now fast forward 20 some years later, I'm in my late 50s at this point now. It's like, okay, I have the resources financially. I don't have to take every gig that comes along as a musician. I can start. I did the same thing I did with my music. I studied with some of the greatest acting coaches in Los Angeles. It was at one point I was studying with 4 different teachers, 4 nights a week, and going to Groundlings, doing improv for 2 seasons. I took total immersion, just like I did with my music. And I started working right away as an actor. I've been in over 100 films. I've been on General Hospital. I've done commercials, and of course I got 3 major motion pictures, one of them, which we're going to talk about. The first one that I did was a picture called Expelled. And it was with it's kind of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's sort of an homage to that. And the star of that movie was a kid by the name of, I say kid, he's in his 20s, Cameron Dallas. And at that point in his career, he was one of those big Vine stars. And when Vine was really popular, he had, at that point, before the movie was even made, he had 23 million followers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, so the company that originally was going to do the movie was Awesomeness TV, and during that process, Awesomeness TV got bought out by 20th Century Fox DreamWorks. So now this movie is under the umbrella of this huge company. They've got this kid star. I play the principal of the school. I have a really nice comedic role in it. The movie was a huge success. It was on Netflix for 4 years. It just kept running. So that can give you an idea. When we did the premiere, my daughter was reminding me of it. When we did the premiere at the Fox Theater in Westwood, there had to have been at least 15,000 cheering teenagers lining the streets. They had to close off the entire area. And my daughter, being as cool as she was, with a friend of her, she rented a stretch limo for us. And so here we are, we're going down the thing, they're banging on I felt like I was in the Beatles, it was insane, right? And so it's just like, so then that movie kicked it off. Then I was in a movie called Prodigy that is a sort of a psychological thriller, which is where I met Richard Neal, who plays Mr. Miller in the Knights of Swing. And then, of course, we did the Knights of Swing, which I'm directing, acting. I cast the movie. I did all the musical arrangements and co-wrote the underscore with my friend Bob Leatherbarrow, who the drummer who came out. All of these things stay together. And my friend Don Nowak, who plays Mr. Conway in the movie. So it was a kind of a full circle of friendship and musical experiences, sort of all rolled into the Knights of Swing. And I hope we have a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, it almost seemed like everything you did throughout your life was leading to making this movie, because you met people that were helping with it.
Yep. I'm so glad you said that. That's really true. It's
I was going to say, let's talk about it a little bit. So Knights of Swing, tell us a little bit about, what's it about? What gave you the idea for it? And what role do you play in the movie?
Okay, well, I play a principal of the school again, except he's a jazz musician. Yeah, right. Where the Knights of Swing comes from is a longstanding relationship that I have with the executive producer, Mr. Roland Jacks. And my friendship with him started because when my son was, I at a local church that's right around the corner from where I live, I started a youth group band for the kids. They're all mostly junior high kids. My son played piano, and in that band, the girl who played drums, her dad was working for Roland Jacks at the time, and things in his personal life, in Perry's life, the gentleman who was doing this orchestration and arranging for Roland, it was for a musical called Busy. That was a 70s musical, which may be the next film that we're going to do after the one that we're working on right now, which we'll talk about also. But so Roland wrote all the songs for the Knights of Swing, and he had the basis of the story. But initially, we were going to do it as a series. So he had like 10 episodes, 10 like half-hour episodes written for these kids at Castle High. And so, to give our audience some background, the story of the Knights of Swing is set in 1947. It's the story of a young sextet of jazz musicians who play in their garage. The name of their little group is called the Jammin' Pajama Men. And their dream is to have a big band. And so they asked the science and math teacher at the school, Mr. Miller, who's played by my friend Richard Neal, as I was telling you, who we were in Prodigy together. He's a fantastic actor. And so they convince him, because they find out that he had some big band arranging and orchestration in his background from when he was in the war. Now, this is right after World War II. This is 1947. There's still a lot of, racism and prejudice and PTSD is prevalent with the people who have of that generation. And we highlight those aspects of it in these kids' lives, because our lead character, Gifford, who's the leader of the Pajama Men. He's the singer and the alto sax player, which, by the way, is somewhat autobiographical for Roland Jacks, our executive producer, because he was actually in a band in the 40s called the Knights of Swing at a school they called the Castle. He did play alto sax and he sang. And so a lot of it is, historical fiction in and around his experience. But what he did experience with the racism, because in our story, Conrad, who's played by Jeremy Staple, the lead trombone player, is Black. And we have another Black musician playing tenor sax in the band. And the community is not happy that not only are these two Black guys in the band, because you got to remember, at 1947, they still had separate drinking fountains. They still had separate places where you could eat at the lunch counter at Woolworths or wherever you went. So there's a lot of problems with racism at that point. And the community reacts to the fact that we're integrating this band, even though integration had started in Linwood, California, in that area of California at that time. Right. And we also have girls in the band, and we have some Southeast Asian members of the band. And so you can imagine, after World War II, the anti-Japanese sentiment and girls in the band, which was a reality. It's not poetic license on our part, because if you look historically, there were all-female big bands, because most of the male jazz musicians were off in World War II.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So we play that in our story. So we have girl musicians in the band. We have a couple of Black members. We have some Asian people in the band. So obviously with the people who would live in Linwood, which was mostly Caucasian. And so we have this really eclectic mix of kids, and the band, as Mr. Miller says at one point, he says, I think the band is more than just the band. It's almost a refuge. It's a home for them. And they find that home and in the music, and they find the camaraderie in the music. And that's one of the main messages of the music of the movie is that music brings people together, and it can be healing, it can be uniting, and the camaraderie that comes in and around being in a big band, because being in a big band is like being on an athletic team. You guys got to pass the ball back and forth. You've got to listen to each other. You got to be aware of what the saxes are doing. The drummer's got to know where the time is. The bass player's got to be there with them. So it's its own microcosm of a united front of where racism, where gender, all of those things get tossed aside for the value and the joy of the music. And I really believe that the Knights of Swing really shows that. And on another level, our lead character, Gifford, his older brother has returned from the war. And he's, at that time, they didn't call it PTSD, they called it shell shock. And he has vivid recollections of the air raid sirens, the people screaming, and so you see, and then there's a real condescending attitude of the older brother to the younger brother. He says, well, you were here. You didn't have to go through what I went through. You have no idea what I went through, And so he kind of resents his younger brother. You're playing this music of this big band. You try to do what I did. So there's that feeling, but eventually the music heals them. And I don't want to give away too much of the story. It's very touching. This is a very family oriented film. You don't have to cover your kids' eyes when you're watching this, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have some grit to it and some guts to it, because we do tackle some very important issues in this movie, especially
I love the whole premise for the movie. I grew up, my father grew up in the 40s, and he was, he loved big band music. So I kind of, when I was growing up, he was playing that music. My mother and him would go out dancing, when they could. I still remember and have fond memories of that. So big band music has always been a favorite of mine. And it was so popular in the 40s. I mean, that was the time for it.
Yes, it was.
I love that you took all of that. There was so much going on in that decade, and you took all of that and put it in this movie.
Thank you very much. We're really excited about it. We've got some really great reviews from it. And people have really, at one of the screenings, one of the audience members came up to us and said, so what did you think? And they said, the only thing I can say is this movie is healthy. And I think that's a funny adjective to describe a film, is that a film is healthy, but because it makes you feel good, because it is a feel good movie. And I always wanted to make a feel-good movie. Sister Act was one of my favorite feel-good movies, because and that's what this is kind of like. You got the rags to riches kind of guys. These guys start off in the garage, and the next thing you know, they're at the Battle of the Bands in this huge theater with competing against some of the best bands in Southern California. And it's that the triumph of the spirit, and it's really shows how their camaraderie and the dedication of Mr. Miller and my support as the principal of the school for this band, and shutting out the negativity of the voices of the people who think that it's shouldn't be integrated, and that there's a lot of forces trying to stop this band, and their determination is what the audience, I think, feels that and definitely roots for them,
Yeah, I love that. What's been the reaction from like friends and family that have seen it?
Well, my family and my friends are so proud of me, and all the work that we did, and I have to give a shout out to the people that really helped make this movie, because it was interesting. I was on as an actor, I was on a film shoot for a proof of concept for a new series that they were going to try to put together on BET, and it was going to be the story of the first female African-American symphony conductor, and I played. My role in that proof of concept was the maestro of the orchestra, and I was very supportive of her to get this. And of course, kind of similar to the Knights of Swing, there was a lot of blowback for her to have a female, not only a female conductor, but an African American female conductor for in that classical world, in the symphony world. And so on that film shoot, there was a young man named Tam Lam, and he was the cinematographer. And we got to talking at lunch, and it was like, I said, well, I'm going to be making this movie, The Knights of Swing. We're going to need, a cinematographer. Would you be interested in being part of the camera team in that? And then he said, yes. And he said, but you've got to meet my friend, Donald Nguyen. Both of these gentlemen are Vietnamese, and all of these guys that are on our film crew are in their early 30s. Our cinematographer, my and I really have to say that this movie wouldn't exist without, of course, our executive producer, Mr. Roland Jacks, who created the world of the Knights of Swing. But David Guttel, who started off as the first AD of the movie, and he was contributing so much to the directing the movie. I decided that it would be improper to just have my name as director of the movie, and I invited him to be co-director with me. And then because we had already taken Roland's 10 episodes and wrote the screenplay from it, where we used a lot of what Roland had already written, but we added scenes and changed scenes and edited. We slaved over the screenplay of this. So David and I became really close in both our concept of how the movie would be shot and how it would be, the story would be told. And so that really began a friendship that now I'm hoping that I'll get a chance to talk about the movie we're doing right now. I have one day off right now. I've been up north. We've been filming the next movie called 47 Days. We'll get into that. But when Tam Lam introduced me to Donald Nguyen, Donald had already been producing. These guys had been making movies since they were 15. Even though they're in their early 30s, they have so much experience. They've gone to film school. They have so much knowledge. So Donald became the kingpin to this. He introduced me to David. He introduced me to Brian Lang, our cinematographer, to Ian, our lead gaffer, and then the web just began to expand into this Knights of Swing family and our production team, which we've completely reunited again to do the second film. And boy, are we like a well-oiled machine now. I mean, we were great, and we really gelled when we were doing it. But after spending all that time, and you have to know, Michael, that we made Knights of Swing during COVID.
Wow.
So
yeah, not easy.
Oh my goodness, it was so difficult because we had to be tested every 72 hours. Yeah. Everybody had to wear a mask until it was time to film. The whole crew had to have their masks and shields on the entire time. And we filmed parts of it in Pomona during the summer, and it was 104 degrees. So you've got people with masks on and makeup dripping down their faces. The makeup people are dusting and patting and drying. It's, your armpits. I mean, it was not easy doing 8 to 12 hour days like that. But the movie got made. We were determined, and it probably made us all the more united because we all fought through that. Everybody really wanted to make this movie. Everybody did their part. And so we kind of became a family of in our production team to do this. And I feel very, very blessed to have had all of these working relationships with these people that are so dedicated to making a great movie. There's nobody sitting around looking at when's lunch, they're like, hey, you know what? In the next scene, we're going to need this. I'm going to go prep that room. I'm going to do that. Make sure hair and makeup has
that's great.
Ready. You know what I mean? That's the kind of things, that's the kind of dedication and the camaraderie that we shared in this team. Yeah.
I love that so much. And obviously you had a great relationship or you wouldn't be making the new movie. So before we talk about the new movie, where can we watch Knights of Swing?
Well, Knights of Swing now is available on several different platforms. We started off on Vimeo On Demand that you can rent it from there. Yeah. But that platform is a little unwieldy because you have to authorize the app on your TV if you don't have a smart TV.
It's a little tricky.
It's a little tricky. And so now finally we've gotten distribution where we're on Apple TV. You can rent it or you can buy it, and you can watch it for free on Tubi, which you just have to watch commercials. But one of the things I really liked about how the artificial intelligence works on Tubi, they picked great commercials that really fit the the genre, like the very family-oriented commercials. It's not like Joe Bag of Donuts and his air conditioning service. It's, you know, it's like really, you know, nice, like the animated commercials from Ralph's and some of the other.
Oh
more,
yeah.
You know, and so
we're excited to watch. I mean, the preview was it looked great. It made me want to watch the movie. But we're having all of the kids over for Mother's Day, and that's going to be what we're doing. We're
that's
fixing
fantastic.
the meal. Yeah, I'm going to watch Nights of Swing because I think it fits that kind of family type of movie.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, the kids are all grown and got their own kids, but they're coming over, and that's how we're spending our Sunday. We're going to watch Nights of Swing.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope more people do that. The movie's doing really well. People are really enjoying it. And we're really excited about that. And that's wonderful. Thanks for saying that. We'll give our audience a good, an idea to do that.
Yeah. I think it's going to be great. So, okay. So let's talk about the new one. You know, what's the new one about? You got the same group together. So
We do.
What's this one about?
The movie is entitled 47 Days.
Yep.
And it's the same hierarchy.
Yeah.
Roland Jacks wrote the libretto to this because it's a kind of a complicated scenario. It's a musical, kind of like Jesus Christ Superstar. This is a faith-based film.
Yeah.
It's the first faith-based film. Although Nights of Swing does have some overtones of being somewhat of a faith-based film. It's mostly a family film. And but this is a faith-based film because it is 47 days is the story of the last 47 days of Jesus's life on earth. Starting from when he arrives in Jerusalem through his death and resurrection and his ascension into heaven. And that part of the story is told in song. There's very little dialogue at all.
Love that.
It's kind of contemporary Christian. It's a full rhythm section with groove and sort of rock and R&B elements, but with a full orchestra behind it. So it's a very expansive, very, very in all-encompassing and very enveloping sound. We've got amazing singers that from some of the best studio singers in Los Angeles to our lead characters, and some of the members from the jazz group Take Six are singing on it. And so that's what we call the inner story. And that's the inner story. But the outer story is a family story where at Easter, I play the grandfather of the family. They call me Papa. My wife and I are having all the kids over for Easter vacation, Easter break.
Yeah.
And my son, Joseph, and his wife, Juliana, their marriage is on almost done. Because he's a workaholic advertising agent, and he's really motivated, highly motivated in his work, and it's destroying his family relationship.
Sure.
His wife has kind of had it, and the kids are pretty like they want their dad. They want it the way it used to be when they were first together, and he's gotten so motivated. So they come. My daughter and son-in-law and their one child are already at the house. That my son and daughter-in-law, Joseph and Juliana, are late because he had more work that he had to do. So they're coming in, and the family's already been together and spending, doing Easter egg hunt and coloring eggs and getting ready for the big holiday and the big dinner and all that. And so what ends up happening is I tell the story of the 47 days to my grandchildren. And each time we get to a different aspect of the song, of one of the songs, and an aspect to the story, we morph from present day into Jerusalem, into the world of the Jesus and the apostles and that time period. And then we have little devices that bring us back and forth from the present day, and the message of love, forgiveness, healing, sacrifice that's in the Jesus story become applicable to today, rather than just retelling the story of what the Bible teaches about Jesus. And we're not being preachy about this. We want people to hear the story and decide for themselves what is the value for them. We're not asking people like, you need to be a Christian. It's nothing like, it's kind of like I don't know if you've ever seen the animation of the Prince of Egypt. It was the story of Moses. How that story is presented. It doesn't shove that down your throat. This is the story. What does it mean to you? And we show how the story during Jesus's time, how those values of love, forgiveness, and the way I look at it, Michael, is the real story of the Jesus story is the first thing he said is that the greatest commandment of all is to love one another as I've loved you. So if it starts with love, then love can bring forgiveness, and then forgiveness and sacrifice can bring healing. And that's what we see happen in this movie. The values that Jesus talked about and that are in the New Testament and in the scriptures become applicable to today. Why study all these things and why learn all these things, right, and not make it mean something in your life? And that's our goal in this movie. And I really think that David and I have written a screenplay that's going to really touch your heart, and it's going to make the message of the Jesus story really mean something to today. Because I think that, in all honesty, and maybe some people will criticize me for this, but I think in today's world, Christianity, the religion of Christianity has kind of been hijacked in a way where it's used as a political weapon, or there's this whole Christian nationalism thing that's going on that I don't think that's what Jesus wanted. I don't think that that's what the message is. And I think it's way beyond any type of political, agenda. It should be about the truth and love of what that message is. And if people get that out of this movie, I'm going to be delighted. And I know that it's Rollins' goal, because he wrote all these songs, and they're very beautiful songs, and they have so much heart to them, and so much of the spirit of what I think the message of the Jesus story is. So
yeah, I love that. My grandparents would have absolutely loved that. My grandfather was a Baptist minister. Most of my family was involved musically in the church, and they were always very much against utilizing Christianity as more of a weapon instead of the message that we kind of grew up with, which is the love. Everybody should kind of figure out what that means to them, what parts really connect with them. And we've gotten away from that a little bit. I know they would love that. So that one I think is really exciting. Have you filmed that yet, or are you getting ready to film it?
No, well, I'm actually on a one-day break. I came back. We're filming about a half hour north of Santa Barbara in a little tiny town called Gaviota, which the population is 94. But our executive producer has had a lot of success in his life, and he started off very, very meager life, and he's built a financial empire for himself, and he's been a philanthropist. He gives so much to the community, not only here in Los Angeles, but all across the country, with sports outreach, with education supplements. He even has a school in Uganda that he supports. It's very, very, very giving, and a man who really embodies what it means to be a giving Christian. And so his goal was to make this film. He wrote all the songs, and initially it was just the inner story. And then David Guttell and myself, who are co-directing this again, and we wrote the entire story that weaves that together. And I think, and Rollin loved what we did with in connecting that all together. And so we just finished our first six days of filming. I play the grandfather, and we've been very fortunate to get two members of the cast of The Chosen
Nice.
to be part of our cast. A guy named Yoshi Barrigas, who plays Philip the Apostle, and Catherine Lipstone, who plays Lazarus' sister in the series. And Yoshi was on the series for 3 years, a series regular, and he brings a lot of those sensibilities to it. Great actor, great human being. Everybody in this cast is the same thing. I don't know. Thank you. It's like everybody's just from the table read, like from the first 5 minutes when people came in, it's like, oh, it's great to see it. It's like we've all felt like we all knew each other already. It's been like that on set, and combine that energy with the energy and the family feeling that we have with our cast and crew, and we're on this gorgeous blueberry farm ranch in Gaviota, California. We're filming the whole, because it's about 100 acres. There's steer there, there's cows there. There's they just did a branding thing, so it's very Americana. There's a creek and a bridge and this huge. It's called Restoration Oaks, and they use it. People have weddings and parties there, and so we've block booked it for these 2 weeks. We did our first 6 days. I just got home yesterday. I'm going back tonight. I'll be filming again tomorrow morning for another 6 days, and then we have a couple days at the lake, and then some of the driving scenes. Then the outer story will be completely filmed. Then the inner story, the biblical part, we're filming at the end of June at a place called Blue Cloud Ranch, which is north of here in Santa Clarita. And it's a movie set that it has an Iraqi town that was built by Clint Eastwood for American Sniper. And we're going to dress that to make that look like Jerusalem, which it already does. And they have a tomb there. They have a place where we can do the crucifixion. There's all, yeah, it's like, there's like 7 different locations on that lot that we're using. So we'll be there for a couple of weeks. That'll take care of the inner story. And then there's one lake scene that we're going to be filming at Lake Casitas, which we're going to represent as the Sea of Galilee for the fishers of men, when the apostles are fishing and they can't catch any fish. And Jesus comes up to them and says, cast your nets on the other side. And so and then we parallel that with me, Grandpa, taking my 2 grandkids out fishing as part of the story. So
I love that. I just both of those projects I think are so great, and they both have that kind of feel good, family oriented, flavor to them. So I love that.
Well, there's not a lot of that. In all
There's
honesty, not a lot of movies that are like that. I mean, we still see so much violence and psychological thrillers and horror movies, and I don't have a problem with any of the genres at all. But
Sure.
There's not a lot of this. And what we really feel too is that there's not many Easter stories either. There's a lot of Christmas movies, but there's not very many Easter movies.
No.
So we're hoping that this will be in theaters and available for April next year for Easter. That's our goal. We're hoping to get it finished by post-production by the fall, and be working with our distributors and getting it out there and get a promotional campaign for it. We already have a lot of interest in it because of the nature and the uniqueness of the story and the way we've crafted this.
I love it. I love it. Well, Emilio, this has been terrific. I thank you so much for taking some time. Big fan of yours. I didn't realize it, but my kids grew up watching all those Nickelodeon shows, so we were listening to your music, didn't even know it. With that, so, yeah, always been a fan, and I'm really looking forward to Nights of Swing and watching that this weekend.
Well, we hope that your audience does too, and I really appreciate you inviting me on the show. And I'm sorry I didn't let you talk more. I
bring you on to let you talk. Nobody wants to hear me talk.
Well, the questions that you asked me were at the perfect time, and I really appreciate you being so in tune with the whole process of what we do, and your compliments and are just deeply appreciated. And I'm so glad that you invited me to come on the show.
Yeah, you'll have to come back when you get the is it 47 steps?
47 days.
47 days. When you get that one out, you got to come back and we'll talk more about it.
I would love to.
Yeah, we'll do that. So before we wrap up, Emilio, are you on social media? And if you are, where can we find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. Sure, we have a Facebook page for Nights of Swing, and you got to remind your audience that it's spelled KNIGHTS.
That's right. Yeah, thank you.
Like the Knights of the Round Table, Nights of Swing, and it's available on Tubi. It's available on Apple TV, and there's other streaming services that it's available on. We're supposed to be on Amazon Prime. I'm not sure if they accepted it. I'm not sure if it's actually live yet, but it will be on there too. And it's getting great reactions, great reviews. I get, we've had so many different reviews in a lot of the trade magazines that have just said wonderful things about it. Our Rotten Tomatoes score is pretty darn good for an independent film. We're somewhere in the 70s right now, which for an independent,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, with really, we don't really have any name actors in this, in the nicest way. Richard, Neil, and myself are kind of like the name people, but everybody else is, so a couple of them are the first movie that they've been in, but they did a terrific job. And it's about the music, and it's about the camaraderie of music.
I love it. I love it. All right, Emilio, hold on one second. Really enjoyed that one. I was telling Emilio off camera that I love speaking with people that are passionate about what they do, and obviously he is. And he's such a talented musician, really talented actor as well. So I hope you enjoyed that one. Please support Nights of Swing, 47 Days coming out hopefully around next Easter. Support that one as well. Those type of passion projects are so important, I think. So let's make sure we get behind those. We didn't talk about it, but he has written music for King of the Hill and Fairly Odd Parents as well. I was telling him that, I was a fan of his and didn't even know it, because when my kids were growing up, we were watching those shows and the music was so good on those that, I'm a fan. I just didn't realize it was him that was writing it, or him and his son in the case of Ned's Declassified. Thank you guys so much for tuning in with us. I hope you enjoyed that. It was a blast for me. If you'd like to support us, it's simple. All we ask is that you subscribe. It's free. You can go to our YouTube channel, MeisterCon Pod, subscribe to us there, or wherever you listen to your podcast at, just subscribe there. That'll help us out. You can also find all close to 600 episodes now, audio and video, on our website, meistercon.com. So definitely check that out. Thank you guys so much. Until next time, bye everybody.